By now, you've probably heard the term wave theory before, perhaps you've been told to ride the wave and maybe experience one of these waves for yourself. But plenty of players are still confused what wave theory actually is, and if you ask, you don't always get a straight answer, because let's be honest, most players don't actually know what wave theory is, they're just repeating what their famous streamers like to say. Well, if you're like me and actually want to understand, you're in luck. Today, I'm going to explain what wave theory is without any of the clickbait. So why is there so much controversy about this? After all, it should be pretty simple. Either it's real or it isn't, right? Well, the main reason that players can't quite agree on whether wave theory actually works or not is because when they're talking about wave theory, they're actually asking two different questions. So let's tackle the first and easier one of those first. Do waves actually exist? In order to explain waves, let's recap how unit pools work. As you know, when you roll a shop in TFT, it pulls units out of a shared pool of available units. As players buy units, copies are removed, and if enough copies are taken and no more units are left in the pool, then that unit will no longer show up in the shop. Most of this is public information. There are units you can see on everyone's board or bench, but there is a hidden element which is a player's current shop. Any units you have currently in your shop have already been removed from the pool but is not visible to any other players. So as an example, if you've got 8 copies of a 5 cost and rolling for that last one, even if you don't see anyone holding it on a board or bench, it may still be impossible to hit if one of your opponents is keeping one in their shop. And there's simply no way to know about this unless the players actually tell you. This is essentially what wave theory is about. Some amount of the time, those shops might contain the units you want, in which cases they're less likely to appear for you. In these situations, you want to avoid rolling as your rolls are less efficient. But other times, players' shops might be helping you by keeping unwanted units out of the pool, making the units you want more likely to appear. This essentially is a wave. And so the answer to the first part, do waves actually exist, is pretty simple. Yep, that's just how the game works. But here is where players get tripped up, because there's a second and much more important question is, how do we use this information in a game of TNT? Well, according to wave theory, it's recommended that you roll maybe 2 or 3 times a stage and just see what your shops look like. If you hit the units that you want, then chances are you're in a wave and you should keep rolling, perhaps even below 50 gold. And if you don't see any units, then you should just stop. And the main part of this that people debate about is whether it's actually worth it to drop below 50 gold and lose interest intervals in order to chase the wave. Now, in theory, if you are on a wave, it's actually pretty efficient to continue rolling, and you definitely should roll even beyond interest intervals. But there's the big catch. Only if you're sure that you're on a wave. And unfortunately, 3 rolls is nowhere near enough to actually determine if that's the case or not. Maybe you just got lucky to see units in those 3 rolls and are actually on a bad wave and rolling more is hurting more than helping. Or maybe you just got unlucky to not see any units and you actually are on a wave, but you don't know it and you've missed it. The point is, those 3 rolls that people are recommending is nowhere near enough, and the reality is it would take way too many rolls to actually give you a significant shot at figuring out whether you're on a wave or not. The other thing is, with how many units are in the pools, most of the time you will be on a wave, and it's pretty rare that multiple copies of your units are actually being held in opponents' shops. So that's the main problem with waves. Even though they work in theory, it's much harder to put them into practice. Players have ran simulations to prove that it works, but I'd bet there's some flaws and things they've overlooked in their assumptions. Alright, great. So now what? Seems like we just wasted a bunch of time talking about nothing. Well, if you got it this far, I won't leave you empty-handed. While wave theory itself isn't all that useful, the things it recommends actually have some merit. For example, if you do happen to see a lot of copies of a unit during your slow rolls, it is often worth it to roll deeper, but to be clear, not because you're in a wave, but because each copy puts you closer to 2 or 3 starring your unit, and the closer you are to upgrading your board, the more worth it is to roll beyond 50 gold. Interest you potentially lose can be gained back by winning rounds and preserving HP by having that stronger board. So while wave theory itself is a bit of a trap, it turns out that the gameplay it encourages is actually a pretty good thing to follow. And if you think about it, most of the time when you're slow rolling, you're already rolling about 3 times the stage anyway. If you happen to see some copies, it can be worth it to dig another 10 gold or so to see if you happen to find more. And at the end of the day, you're not hurting your interest that much going to 40 or even 32 gold. But once again, make sure you have a very good reason if you ever drop below these thresholds, and a wave is not a good reason. Well, hopefully you know a little bit more about wave theory now, and the next time you see someone ask, you can probably explain it to them and maybe talk them down from believing in it. If you did enjoy this explanation though, please make sure to give the video a like below, and if you have any of your own comments regarding wave theory, maybe disagreeing with me, please drop them in the comments below and I'll be sure to respond. And in case there's another TFT myth that might need busting, make sure to be subscribed to know when those drop. And I'm still on that streaming hiatus, but do plan on resuming soon, so I would really appreciate a follow at twitch.tv/blupthecat. Until next time, class dismissed.